Now turns to part 3.
You'll hear an interview on IQ tests. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now listen carefully to the interview and answer questions 21 to 30. Mrs. Kellerman, a specialist in child psychology, is interviewed by Bridget.
Mrs. Kellerman, why is it that some children perform much better than others at school? Obviously, it can't be denied that certain children are brighter than others, but it's not as simple as that. A lot of emphasis is placed on intelligence measured by tests, so-called IQ tests, which only measure certain types of intelligence, such as basically linguistic and numerical skills, or reading and mathematics to put it plainly, which is unfortunate because some children are bound to suffer. A good example was a friend of mine's son who was kept out of the top class at school because of his average IQ. That's around 100. His father, though he had no idea his son was going to be an architect, always said he was a clever child. Apparently, he was able to picture things in his mind and draw accurately at a very early age. The point is that his university life might not have been so difficult if his ability had been recognized sooner. What you're saying, then, is that some children have abilities that are not easy to measure, that aren't appreciated by many schools. Precisely. And if these schools are not spotted sufficiently early, they cannot be developed. That's why, in my view, there are so many unhappy adults in the world. They are not doing the things they are best at. What are those other kinds of intelligence? How can we recognize them in our children? Well, take musical talent. Many children never get the chance to learn to play an instrument, but while they might not become great artists or composers, they may get a lot of pleasure and satisfaction. Musically gifted children are fascinated by all kinds of sounds, car horns, animal noises, and so on, and they can easily recognize tunes and sing them in key. How can a parent encourage them? Sing to them and teach them new songs. Buy a piano or even a cheap instrument such as a recorder. If you can afford it, send them to music lessons as soon as possible. Play recordings of different instruments to them. What about a child who is good at sport? Could that be described as a form of intelligence? Most certainly. We psychologists call it motor or bodily intelligence. These children move gracefully and handle objects skillfully. A child who finds it easy to take things apart and use various tools may well become an engineer with the right encouragement. We should give them models to make and take them to science museums. However, unless these children are also good with words and numbers, they will probably not do well in school examinations. Is there anything a parent can do to help in this case? Yes, it may be worth spending money on private lessons, but, hardly anyone is good at everything. In my opinion, a child should be judged on his individual talents. After all, being happy in life is putting your skills to good use, no matter what they are.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You are going to listen to a talk from a horse expert, Dr. Alan Sampson. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello everyone. It's my pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope that my experience will help you as you choose your course of study here at the university. There are a number of key areas that I want to highlight in my talk with you today. Firstly, I hope to show that there are real career opportunities in the equine or horse industry. Also, I want to point out the qualifications you'll need in order to find employment within the industry. A lot of people look at horse training and other equine activity as being a task that can be done by anyone. I hope to show you today that this is far from true by pointing out some of the typical tasks that those employed within the horse industry are expected to carry out on a regular basis. I think you'll see that our work is far from a simple activity and requires discipline and dedication. Our riding school for young riders and an in-depth look at the principles of dressage, the French word meaning training, I won't have time for today, but we'll discuss in later sessions. And although beyond the scope of my talk today, breeding is also an incredibly interesting area of study which I look forward to sharing with you at a later date. Perhaps I should begin my talk by giving you a broad brush overview of the equine industry and where it's headed. Today, the industry is a multi-million pound concern. Many areas of the horse or thoroughbred industry, as it is often called, are expected to continue to expand as part of the national growth trend in leisure industries. The large investment of the Middle Eastern countries in the 1980s and the more recent investments from the Japanese has had a large influence in the development of the current strong market for both racing and breeding stock here in England. Currently, the thoroughbred industry is generating more than £900 million per year in exports alone. As you can imagine, opportunities exist in many branches of the thoroughbred industry. In fact, in a number of areas, the industry is really expanding. Here in England, around 50,000 people are employed in the primary equine industry and a further 20,000 in ancillary industries. Of course, as with all other industries, practical experience is essential to prove ability and commitment. Although I said the employment outlook for those working in the equine industry is favourable, employers are increasingly looking for more experience and higher qualifications. Individuals intending to take up study often ask me which courses I recommend. Well, there is a good selection of courses to choose from. Personally, when I began in the industry, I enrolled in a part-time certificate in equine management course. It's a good way to gain a general overview of the industry, but offers only minimal career opportunities for graduates. The Bachelor of Equine Science and Thoroughbred Management courses offer a more in-depth look at specific learning areas. Horse riding theory, grooming and saddling are covered, as well as the more scientific areas such as the history and characteristics of breeds, my current area of research, as well as such topics as anatomy and safety in horse handling. From this degree, students can choose to undertake postgraduate studies. By far, the two most common employment areas for university graduates within the equine industry is equitation, which is, by definition, the act or art of riding a horse, and horse training and management, which involves such diverse activities as instruction, stable upkeep, and horse show entries. For those of you looking for long-term, secure employment within the industry, I recommend undertaking some kind of educational coursework. These days, just to be a stable hand, job seekers are presenting with college certificates which are increasingly becoming the minimum level of education. Working in racehorse stud management, grassland management and equine exercise and nutrition requires a Bachelor of Science, and no longer will the bachelor's degree suffice when it comes to specialised equine health and research. Only postgraduates or PhDs are now finding employment in these kinds of areas. I'd now like to take a brief look at the degree to which...
You now have 30 seconds to check your answers.
That is the end of part 4.